So one of the questions I get asked all the time is when you're out in public, when you're in the real world, when you're having dinner with friends and you're meeting your neighbors or relatives, what do you do if evolution comes up as a topic of conversation? Or if somebody says, I don't believe in evolution, or I don't think they should teach it in the schools, or it's just a theory. Well, I'll warn you right up front, this is a really good way to alienate people and get them upset with you. But I think there are much better ways to handle disagreement. And one of the first things that I try to do when someone brings that point of view up is politely indicate that I disagree with them so they understand what's going to follow. But then I try to do something that I think all of you at this stage in your careers can do very effectively. And that is, let them know how science works. There's a stereotype out in the real world. There's a stereotype that science is kind of like a closed community, a real tight-knit fraternity or sorority, where getting ahead depends on doing exactly what your superiors want and always kowtowing up to the big people, the National Academy people, department chairs, stuff like that. The reality, as I'm sure all of you know, is that science works in an entirely different way. The worst thing anybody could hope for embarking on a research project are results that simply confirm existing ideas. That's boring. What we all lay awake at night dreaming about is the revolutionary discovery, the one that's going to upset the apple cart, the one that's going to destroy the common theory, because that's how you can make your reputation. Nobody ever got famous by confirming other ideas. They got famous by coming up with revolutionary results and hatching new ideas of their own. Emphasize that that's how science works. The same dynamic, trust me, works in the field of evolutionary biology at the genetics and the molecular level. The way in which people get ahead is by testing, by looking, by probing the theory, any theory, for weaknesses, and that counts as evolution as well. That counts in evolution as well. And what I first try to do is let people know that science is contentious, that the very dynamic of science, the competitive nature of science, guarantees that if evolution was a uniquely weak or shaky theory with no evidence behind it, people would be standing in line, scientists standing in line to knock it off its pedestal. They're not. I can't think of a single theory in the life sciences that has been tested and probed more thoroughly than evolution. It's 152 years after the publication of The Origin of Species, and it's still standing. That's a darn good theory. Second point that I try to make is what a theory in science means. To an average person, theory is just a guess or a hunch. Like, I have a theory as to why the San Francisco Giants won the pennant last year. Or I have a theory as to why this particular politician's ideas are good or bad or indifferent. That's not what we mean by theory in science. Many people think that fact is something you're certain about, and theory, something shaky. The reality is that theory is a higher level of understanding than fact, and here's the reason why. Facts are simply repeatable, isolated observations. I drop this ball, it falls down. Sun comes up in the morning. The wavelength of light, visible light, is the following. These are all facts. What theories do is to take collections of isolated facts and put them together into a single explanatory framework. For example, the atomic theory of matter is a theory that literally takes hundreds of thousands of facts, observations, about the nature of matter and ties them all together into an explanatory theory. None of us in education ever expects a course in atomic theory 10 years from now to be called a course in atomic facts, as if atoms were something we weren't sure about. Theories in science never become facts. Theories in science explain facts. And the reality is that although people raise a lot of arguments against evolution, there isn't a single experimental fact or observation that has appeared in the last 150 years that contradicts the broad outlines of the theory of evolution. Then the last thing I try to do is really very simple, and that is to say that science is an enterprise in which we try to find out how the natural world works. It's not an enterprise that takes on religion in a hostile way. And in fact, many of the greatest scientists in all history have in fact been deeply religious. And we can start with Galileo and Newton, but in more recent times, Gregor Mendel, the founder of the modern science of genetics, he was a priest. As it turns out, Theodosius Dobzhansky, I know it's a big name, but he's probably the greatest evolutionary geneticist of the 20th century. He was a devout person as well. Francis Collins, terrific cell and molecular biologist who heads the National Institutes of Health, is an evangelical Christian. All of the people that I just mentioned, the recent people, are in fact strong supporters and contributors to the science of evolution. Now, people can look at evolution and draw a variety of conclusions as to how it fits the religious faith. But evolutionary science itself, like all of science really, is neutral on issues of religion. There are ways to understand evolution within a religious context, and I've actually written about those in a couple of books and many articles, and other scientists have too. And finally, and here's the most important thing, when someone expresses disagreement with you on a point this fundamental, I think what you have to do is engage them, and rather than argue with them. And by engage, I mean engage them as you would a colleague. If you and your colleague are working on the same problem and you have slightly different ideas about it, what do? Do you call each other names? Well, maybe in some cases, in some fields you do. But what you do ideally is you lay out your data. You show each other your gels, your sequences, your atomic level structures. And from this airing of data, the other person begins to see that you're a person of goodwill, that you're just interested in solving the same problem that they are. I have found that technique, in effect, trying to take people in to the scientific community, saying, let me show you why we think this is so, to be enormously effective. Now, I'll guarantee you, you're not going to be familiar with every argument that comes out against the theory of evolution. Some of your colleagues will. You might want to run those arguments down. You might want to go to websites to try to find answers to these arguments. There's a really good website called Talk Origins, Talkorigins, talkorigins.com, in which all of the anti-evolution arguments that I've ever heard of are answered in a very definitive way. So there are resources out there for you. But I think the most important thing that any of us can do as a scientist or as an apprentice scientist is to let people know why we went into science. It wasn't because we have a secular humanist axe to grind. It's not because we want to destroy God. It's because we really, really want to understand how the world works. And when people see that sincere motivation, when they see the twinkle in your eye, you're going to win them over. They might be a little baffled by some of the science, but once they see, as I say, that gleam in your eye, the glint, the excitement of scientific discovery, they're going to drop their suspicions of science and they're going to appreciate you as just another person working in this great enterprise. Lots of luck with that.